I'm 22 years old, fresh out of college, and I recently got a job at my old high school as a sort of computer intern in the school basement. The basement of the school is very messy and disorganized, but there is a small 3-person office that's actually very nice down there. It has 3 nice big desks, 2 mini fridges, a flat-screen TV mounted on the wall, and oh so satisfying air conditioning, a luxury the students and teachers cannot enjoy in the school. And of course, all the school servers and other computery stuff. I got the job because 3 of my old computer teachers flat out adored me. I could actually consider them as real friends, not just teacher figures, so they all helped tremendously in landing me this job. It's been great, until something that happened a few weeks ago. My 2 co-workers that shared the office with me, Dave and Gary, weren't in the office at the time. They were upstairs working on papers or whatever. I was eating my sandwich during my lunch break when I got a phone call from one of the women in the front office telling me the school was on lockdown and that somebody, possibly armed, had entered the school. There wasn't much that I could do other than turn off the lights because, surprisingly, as nice as this little office was, it didn't have an actual door to it, just a big opening, and the door to the whole basement didn't even have a working lock. For my own safety, I did turn off all the lights in the office and my computer screen. I kept my phone on the desk, texting both Gary and Dave, but they wouldn't respond. I sat down there in the dark, playing games on my phone for like 20 minutes, waiting for the call from up front to tell me to resume working. I had no idea what was happening. I couldn't hear what was going on upstairs from down here. But I was not allowed to make any calls until I was informed that the lockdown was over.
Hold on. I'm gonna text, Sly Pie. I'm gonna text Sly Pie and, see if he'll join. No, I don't wanna.
Over. Then the noise.
Okay, guys, let's restart. Or if you want to see this one, why don't we just play this one? This one will be easier.
My name is Ethan, and I'm a photographer. I took a trip last year with my wife to the Colorado mountains for an art project. My wife is also an avid skier, so she talked me into adding skiing into the trip. We had the option to book a room at a ski resort or rent out a private log cabin. The second one seemed more romantic, so I picked that one. Plus, it didn't hurt that it was cheaper. The cabin was nothing luxurious or anything. It was a single-floor, 4-room little thing. A 2-person bedroom, a small living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. It may have been small, but the actual idea of being secluded in a warm log cabin during a blizzard was amazing. However, the storm was interfering with the cable signal, so we didn't have much to do this one particular evening. It was just starting to get dark out at this point, but there was still a decent amount of light outside, so I thought it would be perfect for getting a few shots and videos in the blizzard for backgrounds and wallpapers. I told my wife I'd be back within 10 minutes and slipped on my boots and coat. The moment I stepped outside and shut the door, I noticed footsteps leading up to the door in the snow that had blown under the wooden awning. I could see the prints doubled, as whoever left them there turned and went the opposite direction. I was freaked the fuck out, but I wasn't about to go inside and scare my wife. I decided to give in to my curiosity and followed the prints to the right side of the cabin. Right away, I noticed that they led to the bedroom window. My heart froze in fear when I saw this. I could see my wife sitting on the bed using her iPad. She noticed me, and I waved. She laughed. I continued to follow the footprints around the cabin to the other side. They led to the living room window on the other side. Someone was stalking us, but how long ago was the question? I found myself standing there for a good minute asking myself if I should follow the footprints anymore. For whatever reason, I decided I would. They were now leading away from the cabin. I knew I was following the prints to where this person was going, not coming from, simply by the boot marks. I followed the prints away from the opening and into the trees. That was where I saw him. A man wearing a black coat facing a tree, slouched down looking at the ground. He was still as a statue, and I could see the snow piling up on his hood and shoulders. I froze in my tracks, trying not to make a sound. I would have thought to ask him if he needed help otherwise, but this guy was just standing there not doing anything, like some kind of deranged freak. I started to gradually move backwards without even turning around, making sure this man didn't turn around or notice me. When I got at a visual distance, I turned around and stomped through the snow back to the cabin. When I slammed the door shut, my wife came over to see what was wrong. I saw worry in her eyes. I guess she saw the worry in mine. She knew I saw something, and after a few minutes of harassment, I finally told her what I saw. She immediately started packing her things, telling me we're leaving right away. I told her no, we're not going anywhere. I would not get a refund for leaving early, and I wasn't about to up and leave just because some weird guy was walking around outside. She made a point of locking both locks on the door and making sure all of the windows were sealed shut. For the rest of the night, we read stuff on our iPads. I reviewed the pictures and videos I had taken so far. We turned out the lights early as there wasn't much else to do. What if he's still out there? I remember my wife asking me. There's no way he's still out there, I then assured her. Listening to the wind blowing outside, along with the small flakes of snow hitting the windows, was strangely relaxing, and I knew I'd be able to fall asleep quickly. Except if it wasn't for the knock at the bedroom window. We were both still awake, and we both knew it was a knock from a person. I ushered my wife out of bed and out into the living room without turning on any lights. There was nothing to use as a weapon whatsoever. Our only option was to run before something might happen. I told my wife we'd have to forget our luggage and make a dash for the Jeep. We slipped on our boots and coats in the dark in a matter of seconds, and when we heard a knock at the living room window from the opposite side of our car, we took that opportunity to run. I pressed the unlock button, so grateful I chose to have remote locks on my Wrangler, and we hopped in. The car started with ease, and as soon as the headlights flashed on, the man was standing facing the log cabin on our side now. Not a window, just facing the wall of the cabin in the same position I had seen him in earlier, as if he were hiding his face. We drove to the nearby ski resort without much trouble in the Jeep. We stayed there for the night and went back the next day to the log cabin to collect our things we left behind. He wasn't there. I'm 27 years old. I live alone in a rural town in Virginia, about 2 blocks away from my parents. My parents are both in their 60s, and my mom has become a very worrisome woman in her old age. Sometimes she walks over uninvited and lets herself in, since I had regrettably given her a key, which can get a bit annoying. Like if I would be out really late on weekends at a bar or with women, I would sometimes come home to my mom sitting in the living room waiting, worried sick. I know you may just think, oh my god, that's crazy, why not just put your foot down and tell her to stop? Well, because you don't know my mom. It's very hard to describe her, but she's the kind of worrisome, innocent little lady that you just can't bring yourself to go against. And I hate to mention, she also has mild dementia. Anyway, this was Saturday night. I think it was around 2 in the morning. I was at a nearby club with a group of college friends, really the only place to hang out in this boring town, and I was getting ready to head home. I said goodbye to all my friends and walked the 3 blocks it took to get back to my house. I walked up my front stoop in my drunken haze and dug my hand in my pocket for my keys. When I grabbed the doorknob, I realized it was unlocked. My mom was here again. I quietly opened and shut the front door, locking it behind me. I put my keys on the kitchen counter and found a note written in my mom's handwriting saying, "You forgot this at our house, next to the box of half-eaten cake my parents didn't want." I didn't see my mom anywhere, so I assumed she must have gone upstairs to sleep in the guest bed until I got back, which is something she would commonly do as well. Then I heard footsteps upstairs, confirming it, and that's when I sighed once again. 27 years old, almost 3 in the morning, and she still has to wait up and treat me like a child. I ran upstairs to check the guest bed, empty, along with all the bathrooms. I was afraid Mom was having one of her episodes due to her condition, so I ran to the phone to call my dad. After 4 rings, my dad picked up in a groggy voice, asking what the hell is the matter. After I told him that I heard Mom wandering around upstairs in my house, there was a short pause, and then he said, "That's not possible, she's sleeping right next to me." My mouth fell open as I turned my head to face the dark upstairs, and just barely by the light provided by the kitchen, I could see a head peering around from the corner at the top of the stairs, looking down at me. I screamed into the phone as I ran out the front door and down the street to my parents' house, explaining to my father on the way. About halfway there, my dad told me, "All right, I'm going to call the cops," and hung up. I made it to my parents' house, where my mom was already waiting at the door, worried sick. My mom explained that she did come over to clean my kitchen a little bit and to bring over the cake they didn't want. 2 police cars pulled up in front of my parents' house, where they escorted me and my dad down the street to my house. 1 officer stayed outside with us, while 2 others went inside to investigate. It felt like 15 minutes before they came back outside and said it was clear. They checked the crawl space, the attic, everything. There was really nothing for me to report, other than the door was left unlocked and I saw the outline of a head upstairs before I ran for it. Still, I didn't feel safe sleeping in there that night, so I went back to my parents' house. Me and my dad are certain that my mom simply forgot to lock the door when she left, as her memory has been getting worse over the past few months. My dad has been stopping her from coming over alone from now on, which makes me both sad but also relieved. Some nights I still get paranoid that whoever was in my house that night never left, and is still hiding in here somewhere. It was a typical boring day in calculus, only it was Friday, 7th period, meaning the week was almost over and spring break would finally be upon us, so everybody was getting antsy in their seats, I could tell. We didn't have a test that day like a lot of my friends did with their other teachers, so our teacher in the middle of class just decided to start playing games with us on Sporkle.com. He was a very laid-back teacher like that. As we were doing some brand logo quiz on Sporkle, I remember the exact moment it happened. Right after my friend answered a question, I remember the exact answer too, Adidas. The dean's voice came through the loudspeaker. He sounded panicked and frantic as he told all the teachers this was not a drill and to go into lockdown. I actually got the chills, and I got goosebumps on my arms as our usually laid-back teacher too seemed panicked as he ran to turn off the lights and ushered us to the back corner of the room. We all sat in silence for about 2 minutes, and then the usual buzzing that came from a panel in the back of the room ceased, indicating that the school must have cut all the power. We all looked at each other, realizing this must be serious. A few more minutes of waiting later, we heard a man screaming at the top of his lungs coming down the hallway. 2 girls in the class actually started crying, which made all of us even more scared. As the screaming got closer to the classroom, the lunatic-sounding man started banging on the lockers while screaming, "I'll kill all of you." It was at that moment that I started to fear for my life. My teacher shushed us as we all looked at each other to see our peers' reactions. The banging then moved from the lockers to our classroom door. And that's when one of the crying girls screamed no. The banging on the door only grew worse as the man started screaming, "Open up." 2 of the girls in the class were crying out loud now. It felt like an eternity that man was pounding at the door, but eventually he finally continued down the hallway, screaming like a mentally insane person until we could not hear him anymore. I'd say 10 minutes later, though it felt like half an hour given the situation, the dean came back on the loudspeaker explaining the situation, which was surprising for him to do. He explained that some apparently mentally unstable person entered the building and assaulted the woman sitting at the front desk, causing her to flee the building screaming, and staff wasn't sure if the man was armed or not. Now, this was before the school had cameras or could afford proper security, so the school was wide open to something like this happening. The staff had done a sweep of all the hallways and classrooms and couldn't find him, so the dean instructed the teachers to resume teaching but to keep all the doors locked and to not let any students leave for any reasons. The most disturbing part, however, is that one of the janitors working the night shift found the man sleeping in one of the storage closets near the back end of the school, and according to rumors that were spread by my peers, sticking out of his pocket was a .44 Magnum. The janitor must have done something stupid to wake him up, for example, leaving the closet door open, because by the time a police officer could arrive on the scene, the man was gone. My entire class, as far as I know, to this day, has no idea if this man was ever found, but I like to think that right now, he's being given the proper help that he needs. Three months after I turned 16 in 2005, I got my first car, a '99 Toyota Camry. On a warm Saturday night, when my friend Alex invited me over to one of his friend's big parties, I knew I wouldn't be in a condition to drive the Camry home afterward. So we carpooled with Alex's girlfriend, Brianna. We lived in the countryside of Virginia, meaning less big parties. Meaning when there was a big party, it was a huge deal and everyone would go. We lived about 5 to 10 minutes away from this kid's house. I knew where he lived as I was acquainted with him, but not exactly friends. The whole ride there, we took the same 2-lane highway type road through the woods, and this kid's house was actually on this road further down. At certain points on this road, there were a few houses on either side, and then it would just go back to being a long, empty highway again. The house was tiny, like a lot of houses around the area, but the party was held outside anyways, since its closest neighbors were relatively far away, and noise wasn't an issue. I'll skip most of the party up until the point that Brianna, who was supposed to be our designated driver, had to suddenly leave for a small family emergency. Alex said it was fine and that we'd find a ride home. Well, fast forward another few hours and another few drinks, and I could barely even walk straight. I checked my watch, and it was like 2 in the morning. I figured it was time to go. I started looking for Alex, but I couldn't find him anywhere. In fact, it seemed like everybody I knew had already left. I could barely even think straight, but I was still furious at the fact that Alex could have actually left without me. I asked to use the party host's phone and dialed Alex's home number. After 2 tries, I gave up and then realized I shouldn't wake his family up. So, literally not knowing what else to do, I dizzily stepped out onto the road and began walking back home. I knew this walk would take anywhere from half an hour to an hour in my condition. Maybe after 15 minutes of walking down the road, the slight shine of car headlights on the road was fading in from behind me. Jumping for joy inside, I lifted up my arm and stuck out my thumb. As the car neared, it slowed down and came to a stop right next to me. The man driving the '98 Ford Explorer rolled down the window and asked where you headed. I told him my house was just down the road and beyond a right turn, probably slurring my words beyond comprehension. He chuckled and told me to hop in. I thanked him and joyously hopped into the truck. I was exhausted, and I remember completely disregarding things the guy was asking me because I was so close to just passing out. And that's what happened. The memories of being in that truck turned to a fog, as I'm sure I passed out. The next thing I remember, I woke up still in the moving truck. The guy looked at me and laughed, but didn't say anything. I looked around and realized the road we were on wasn't familiar. I nervously asked, where are we going? He then said, so what were you doing out this late anyway? As the man answered my very straightforward question with another irrelevant question, the sobering reality of the situation hit me. You can let me out anywhere, I told the man. The man responded with a firm no. I felt like throwing up as he said that. No, I really actually felt like I was going to throw up. I started to gag as I felt more and more nauseous by the second. The man took his eyes off the road to look at me, and that's when I thought of the perfect distraction. I turned in his direction as I continued to gag, and he started to kind of lean away and slow down the car. Thankfully, I drank as much as I did because I finally threw up and made a point of doing it all over the man's lap. The man yelled in frustration and stopped the car, and that's when I took it upon myself to run for my life into the woods and duck behind a few bushes. The man came following into the woods with a flashlight, and on 2 separate occasions, he shined the light straight over me without noticing. Eventually, I heard his footsteps walk even further into the woods past me. That was when I ran back to his truck, but unfortunately, he was smart enough to lock it. By some miracle, I saw another car approaching in the distance, and I ran out into the middle of the street, waving my arms like a lunatic. The car tried to avoid me, but I wouldn't let it. They were forced to stop, and I yelled at them to help me before they came back. Once I told them that I was kidnapped by the man who was driving that Ford Explorer, the driver agreed to give me a lift. Not to the police station or anything, but to my house. I made it back safely where I couldn't thank the driver enough. I immediately woke up my parents and told them. My dad wanted to know if I got his tag number, and then I felt like punching myself in the face. I failed to get the simplest information from the guy that would have allowed me to actually properly report him. All I knew was that he drove a faded blue '99 Ford Explorer. I made sure to give Alex a piece of my mind, and part of me always held a grudge against him ever since, just for abandoning me at a party without telling me. I haven't seen him in 4 years now, however, and this was actually the first time I even thought about this incident for almost a year now. As time goes on, even the worst of memories may start to fade, but after writing this to share with the internet, it's once again fresh in my mind. A couple weeks ago, my dad came home and pitched me a small job offer. One of his coworkers was going away for a few days and needed somebody he could trust to watch over his house. The reason my dad pitched this to me was because the man's house has a big CCTV system, basically a camera in every room, and then an operating desk where all screens could be watched on a big monitor. And I'm a computer science major, so my dad just always assumes that I know how to work anything technological. The man told my dad that he'd pay me $200 for the 2 days just to watch the house. Whatever that meant. My dad drove me to the house and introduced me to the man, whose name doesn't matter. The man made it seem like he preferred I stay in the upstairs room with the monitors as opposed to roaming the house all day. That was fine with me though. So when I wasn't eating, I was mostly just sitting in that room with the TV on in the background, and doing schoolwork on my laptop. Ironically, the thing I was doing the least was keeping an eye on the monitors. Night came. I started wondering where in the house I should sleep, since surprisingly, we hadn't discussed that. So I sat back down at the desk and looked at all the different rooms on the screens to see which rooms had beds or couches. I noticed something I wasn't expecting to notice, though. The back screen door was open downstairs. I didn't remember it being open. I looked through each and every camera screen in a panic. In the living room, a closet door was open. This one